Good morning and welcome to the first super session of NAB Show 2015. It is a pleasure to see you all here. We're delighted to have you. We have a great lineup for you today and over the next few days, but our first session this morning, Constant Cravings, using OTT to win the next generation of viewers. It's no secret that advances in technology have shifted the way viewers experience video, allowing for real-time access to live or linear programming. Our opening super session this morning will explore the evolution of the OTT landscape 2015, in particular, now that the reins seem to be loosening on pay TV subscriptions and requirements. What are the real opportunities and the threats that are really creating a reality in this increased place-shifting, time-shifting, and packaging options for video products? What does the next generation of consumers expect from content creators, owners, and distributors? And what must you do to remain competitive? This session will feature an overview of the current environment, followed by an in-depth conversation with leaders in the OTT services, content production, pay TV, OTA broadcasting, and advertising. Please welcome to the stage your moderator for this morning's super session, Mr. Alan Bresnik, the cable, video, and practice lead at Light Reading.
Thanks very much, Leah. Thanks to you all for turning out today. Good morning, Las Vegas. I hope you've had a good weekend here and haven't all lost your money yet at the slots or anything. So we're going to have a great panel here today in our first super session here at NAB. We're going to be talking about over-the-top video. In fact, there's going to be a lot of talk about over-the-top video in the next couple of days because there's a whole track that NAB is doing just covering over-the-top. So we hope to set the stage for that, set the context for that right here. I have a few slides to sort of set the context, but first I'd like to actually show the there we go. Show this session, okay? And first I'd like to introduce all our speakers who will be coming out right now. So speakers, please come up to the stage. We have 4 speakers here for you today. Besides myself, after I be speaking, you'll be hearing from Brett Sappington. Brett is Director of Research for Parks Associates. We also have Darcy Antonellis. Darcy is, as you can see on the slides here. Oh, they're not up on the big thing? Okay, there we go. And then we have Marc DeBevoise on the far end and Kanaan Jemilli. So please join me in welcoming our speakers here today. So we're going to have a good discussion about over-the-top video. As I mentioned, just want to set the context for the discussion a little bit with a few slides to talk about how the pay TV market is developing, how the video delivery market is developing. Brett will join me with a few slides. He also contributed one of the slides for my introduction very generously. I appreciate that. First, I want to go over how the global pay TV market is growing. It's huge. It's growing bigger all the time, mostly because of what's happening in the emerging markets, in Asia, in South America, and in the Middle East, and starting in Africa as well. So as you can see, the market is practically $1 trillion now, and it's going to just keep getting bigger and bigger over the next few years, according to projections. However, in the more mature markets, particularly in North America, the pay TV market has stabilized, flattened, and is actually starting to go down a little bit. A little bit fewer subscribers, a little bit fewer revenues. These numbers show what some of the leading cable operators in the U.S., where they stand now and how they've been losing subscribers over the last 2 years, actually for more than 2 years, but the whole industry has now been losing subscribers for the last 2 years. And also even the leading satellite players in the U.S. are now flattening out and are starting to lose subscribers. The only ones in the pay TV market in North America, and the numbers for Canada would be similar. The only ones in the North American pay TV market who are now gaining subscribers, still gaining subscribers, are the leading telephone companies, the leading telecom firms, either by taking away from the cable and satellite folks or by expanding the market, which is about 100 million households in the US. Other interesting thing that's happening is that cord cutting is accelerating. Not by a lot, it's not growing by leaps and bounds, it's sort of a drip, drip, drip sort of thing. Here's a lot of stats here from different associations and different groups. Brett is going to talk a lot about what Parks Associates is seeing on the cord cutting front, and we'll talk about people who are cutting cord, we'll talk about people who are shaving the cord, we'll talk about cord nevers, and all sorts of different iterations of that, but we'll get into that a bit later. But here's some stats showing that there are more households who are shaving down their subscriptions, who are getting rid of their subscriptions, and there are more who are not signing up to begin with. And it's a question of whether this whole new generation of millennials and others are going to sign up for pay TV services, and if they don't, what does that mean for the overall universe? Okay, here's a slide that Brett shared with us. It shows what the over-the-top rates are in 5 of the leading nations in North America and in Western Europe. As you can see, the US and the UK lead the way in terms of take rate of over-the-top video. In fact, Netflix alone, I think, is in something like 40% of US households right now already, or over-the-top in general is in 40% of US households already. So the US and the Canadian numbers actually reflect the growth of Netflix, and in the US of Hulu, while the high numbers in the UK reflect the popularity of the BBC iPlayer and Love Film. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Netflix is on an aggressive spurt throughout Europe and eventually Asia, and they've been launching in one market after another each month. It'll be interesting to see what these numbers look like in another year or two across Europe as Netflix becomes more and more popular. More numbers show you that it's not just a US phenomenon anymore, it's not just a North American phenomenon, it's not just a European phenomenon anymore, but we're also seeing over-the-top becoming more popular in other parts of the world, in the emerging markets, in Asia. For instance, there's a new service in Asia that was launched earlier this year by Singtel and Sony Pictures Television and Warner Brothers Entertainment called Hawk. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. That is meant to be sort of the Asian answer to Netflix. We're seeing over-the-top services emerge in places like Russia and Turkey and throughout the Middle East. So it's more than a fad, it's more than a North American phenomenon, it's more than a Western nation phenomenon. One of my favorite slides just showing how Netflix is gunning for world domination. Reed Hastings and his crew have targeted 200 countries for Netflix to be in within the next 2 years. So basically, almost every member of the United Nations will be able to get Netflix service. Netflix already has more than 50 million subscribers around the world, close to 40 million of them in the US, but more and more of them are coming from outside the US, more and more of them are coming from outside North America. It's going to be interesting to see as HBO now just launched their over-the-top service. It'll be interesting to see Netflix and HBO go head-to-head around the world with their over-the-top services and see how big the market is and how much they can differentiate themselves from each other. But we'll get into that more on the panel. It'll be one of the questions we get into. So what do service providers, what do pay TV providers do in response to all this? How do they cope with over-the-top video? I mean, is over-the-top video going to collapse the whole pay TV business model? It could, or it's certainly having a disruptive impact already. What a lot of service providers have done, pay TV providers have done already, is they've gone multi-screen. They're trying to get their traditional, conventional pay TV service on as many second screens, third screens, fourth screens, as many screens as possible, and make their service as ubiquitous and consistent across all the different screens and devices. So here's just a sampling of some of the service providers that have done this in the North America and in Europe. We could easily add dozens more logos to this chart. What's interesting is that there's been a lot of multi-screen launches, but consumers say they want multi-screen. Consumers say they like multi-screen, but there hasn't been a great uptake yet in most places of multi-screen services yet. It's starting to change. I might ask Brett about that, what they're seeing about how things are changing, but it's coming. It's been slow to develop, and there's a bunch of reasons why, which we can get into on the panel. Well, my last slide showing the newest phenomenon is that we have conventional pay TV providers on both the content side and on the service provider side going over the top themselves, even when they're taking the risk of cannibalizing their business partners' subscribers. So we have one member on this panel, CBS, that's doing it. We have HBO. There's going to be a spate of more launches later this year. Showtime is supposed to be launching in about a month. Discovery, there's been a lot of rumors, NBC. And then we have a bunch of traditional service providers, pay TV providers, that are either going or planning to go over the top. We have Dish Network, which launched Sling TV earlier this year. We have Verizon, which has made no secret that they're planning to do something over the top. Sony has done something through their PlayStation. Up in Canada, we have Bell TV doing a service. We have Shaw and Rogers teaming up to do a service. So how far does this go? How big is this market? Where does this all end? What impact does this have on the broadcasters, on the other programmers, on the pay TV providers? How does the universe get shaken up and sorted out, and where will this all leave us? Lots of questions, not many answers yet. But that's it from me. I'll turn things over to Brett to take over with some really interesting Parks Associates research. So, Brett Sappington.
Great, thanks, Alan. That mysteries of the universe, that's an awfully big topic for the whole panel to be able to attack. As Alan mentioned, Parks Associates, we're a US-based market research firm, and we've been looking at the OTT space for a while. In fact, in North America right now, we're tracking 80 to 90 different over-the-top video services that are direct-to-consumer services. That doesn't include all of the TV Everywhere offerings. So 80 to 90 different ones, and that's in both Canada and the US. Many of those have launched, but not all. Some have been announced for the new year. And so this really is a defining year for over-the-top video in not just North America, but for the whole world. In speaking with Alan before the panel began, we tried to decide how we were going to divide things out in terms of introducing the market. And so I want to provide some figures that will help you get an idea of the shift going on and look at the over-the-top space and the consumers that are using over-the-top video. So the slide that is not up currently, there we go. So a couple of things. One is, how much are people watching of online video? And by online video, over the next few minutes, I'm talking about television and movies. So I'm not talking about YouTube and those types of things. I'm talking about professionally created content. And if you look at that consumption across all devices, right now, internet video represents about a third, 36% of video consumed by households in the US. By comparison, that represents only 9% of spending on video. By comparison to that, pay TV represents about 55% of viewing time on all platforms, but it represents 77% of spending by consumers. So we've already seen a shift in the eyeballs moving to online video, and we're just beginning to see the shift in the revenues in that space, or at least in terms of consumer spending. So if we look at over-the-top subscribers, there's a few things that set those folks apart from everyday households. One of those is they watch way more on different devices, computers, mobile phones, tablets. Here you can see a comparison of those households that do and don't have a subscription to the over-the-top video service. And it's probably not that surprising. Typically, people who are willing to pay extra to get over-the-top video, you would expect them to watch more, and they do. They watch roughly twice as much video on a computer and 4 times as much video on mobile devices or tablets. So a pretty significant difference. Their viewing overall is higher. So on televisions, they also watch way more video. Spending. As I said, typically these people love video and they're willing to spend more on video. So you see spending in over-the-top subscriber households, that's higher. What's really interesting is if you look at households that have kids, they spend 90% more on video than households without kids, particularly online video. So that idea that mom and dad are handing the kids a tablet and letting them watch online video, that is absolutely true. And they're paying for content for their kids to watch. Now, Alan mentioned cord cutting, and I want to put a little perspective on this. He had a great slide that showed the subscriber numbers in the U.S., and this data here is from the U.S. The thing I want you to notice is from 2012 to 2014, the penetration of pay TV, the big blue bars, has really held around 86, 87%. It has tailed a little bit, but by and large, it's been stable for years, for a long time. The blue line at the bottom, that shows the percentage of consumers that say that they have an intention to cancel pay TV. So you see it started at 4% in 2012, and by the end of last year, it was up to 8%, which is interesting because you would expect if that's increasing, that the penetration of pay TV would fall off, that people would follow through and cut the cord. So interestingly, we're seeing an incredible amount of frustration with what's going on. And that goes back to the slide I mentioned earlier. If you're spending a lot and watching less on that platform, you may be looking for other options. One other thing, I know that we'll be touching on millennials and the next generation of consumers as part of our panel today. But millennials, in the way that they look at paying for content, is very different from general households, general population. They live in very much of a sharing society. And so for them, the idea that they have an ID or password to a subscription service, to them, it seems fair to them to share that with others, with roommates, with college friends, with things like that, which is a real frustration for the video industry. If you're trying to monetize services and you have 22% of consumers 24 and under that are handing out their passwords to others, that's a real problem. How do you manage that in a way that doesn't alienate them but then protects your revenue stream? So it's an ongoing challenge that the industry. I'm actually eager to hear what the rest of the panel has to say about how we deal with that as an industry. So a few points about over-the-top video, and looking forward to getting into it.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. I guess that's what we get for teaching our kids to share, right? How do you teach millennials not to share? That's going to be an interesting question. Now, I've asked the other 3 panelists to spend a couple of minutes making a couple of key points that they want to make about either their company or about the OTT video space. So let's start with Darcy Antonellis from Vubiquity.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. First, I'll tell you a little bit about our company. Vubiquity is a global premium content services company. We provide managed services and technical solutions for service providers and sit, interestingly, in between both the content community and the service provider community. We also do full-on licensing and have some 500 content relationships where we will program, if you will, for a new premium service and help them launch very rapidly. So as you might imagine for OTT, and at this point in time, it's very interesting for us, and we'll talk more about it relative to what's going on around the rest of the world. We're a global company. We're in about 37 countries and sit behind about 105 million households that offer premium services to consumers.
Okay, thanks. Next, we'll hear from Kanaan Jemilli from New Line. And I want to thank Kanaan for last-minute replacement, graciously stepping up to join us here.
Happy to be here. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So New Line is actually an OTT platform provider for the major sports properties here in the U.S., like NFL, NHL, NBA, and others, and also, as well as entertainment, and also broadcast TV, in all purely OTT. We have some really great statistics last year. We did 50,000 live events. We pushed about 200 petabytes of content to the internet, all OTT. And we work with other companies to actually drive their content from play out all the way to the devices, and we actually do work on the experiences there. Three themes for NAB that I wanted just to share what we're announcing and so forth. First of all, we've done really pushed our hybrid solution, which means it's OTT authenticated and non-authenticated. We have a tennis channel as an example last year, and did that with us, and we're doing more of that. And as pay TV and broadcasters want to kind of dip their toes into OTT and back and forth. Second, we do actually specialize. We do specialized experiences in sports. As you know, hockey would have cameras on top of the goalies. Different sports have different experiences. When we bring those from broadcast into OTT in a major way, and we actually just announced Surf and League, which is a new, really a property that we are powering to the world, and it's a global service. The third area is actually getting OTT onto the big screen, which is for most of us, OTT means you go onto your smartphone, your tablet, but we're doing a lot of work on Roku, Apple TV, but also gaming consoles, and we're announcing our 4K secure streaming solution here, and we've done an OTT trial this year on 4K for a live sport event, a major one, and we're going to see more of that later this year. Thanks.
Thanks, Kanaan. I love the idea of an OTT channel for surfers.
That's right. Very popular, though.
How big a market could there be for that?
There are hundreds of thousands of people who are actually watching that, avid users, avid followers, and we'll see more of them. I mean, just launched this service about 6 weeks ago, and we've seen an uptick from what they had before with the general web presence to actually almost more than 50% uptick. So it's pretty encouraging.
I just have this vision of people taking their iPads out on the Big Sur, you know.
That's right. GoPro goes everywhere, right? So you can have 4K GoPro surfing in Australia or Fiji or any of these locations, and we can do live and also VOD, great surfing footage.
Okay, great. Okay, next we're going to hear from Marc DeBevoise from CBS Interactive, and they are actually one of the first major players in the OTT space among the traditional pay TV providers and broadcasters. HBO announced that they were going to launch a service in the fall, and then CBS the next day said, "Well, we're going to do better. We're going to launch it right now." So, Marc?
Yeah, that was don't worry, we weren't waiting for HBO to do that. We had been planning that for a few months in advance. But obviously work for CBS, the #1 television network, #1 broadcast network, more top 10, 25 shows than any other network. So we have a tremendous amount of fantastic content to work with, and not just entertainment content, but sports and news as well. And we've been pushing that content out online and via digital channels for close to a decade now, whether it be full episodes, live sporting events, or breaking news. Have over 100 million uniques on our various properties across CBS Interactive that are focused on the television network, CBS.com, CBSNews.com, CBS sports.com, and a number of supportive sports businesses that we own, including our fantasy business and a business that happens to compete with New Line in serving colleges for their distribution capabilities of their sports. But the big things for us in the past 6 months have been launching CBS All Access, our direct-to-consumer subscription service that really is there to serve what we call super fans and the cord cutters and cord nevers for sort of everything you ever could have wanted from CBS, or at least everything we can deliver, including the live linear feed of our networks and of our stations, and a deep VOD catalog. And then we also launched a direct-to-consumer 24/7 live streaming news channel called CBSN. Did that across 8 platforms on day one. And we've seen both services really blossom over the past 6 months, and we really feel that these are the right types of steps for a leading television network like ours to be taking and taking advantage of some of the data that these guys have just shown, and really what we see as the consumer trends, sort of driving consumption of video going forward. And we ultimately look at ourselves as hopefully a great creator of content that can distribute that content in numerous ways to reach those consumers. It's not just about on air or online or any other way. It's about having that multi-platform and multi-model approach to reach consumers wherever and whenever they want to get our hopefully great content.
Okay, great, Marc. Any numbers you can share in terms of what take rate you're getting?
No, we're not talking about those things yet. We're very excited about both services, and certainly have been beating our expectations in terms of where we hoped they would be in the first 100 or so days that they've been live. We didn't necessarily plan to launch them within 2 weeks of each other, although we did end up doing that, which is, by the way, never do that. If you're if you're the GM, it's a bad idea. But
okay, so that's lesson 1 from the field right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay, well, we're going to start getting into a question and answer here, but I just want to take a little quick survey of the audience, assuming I can see you out there. How many of you have an over-the-top service in your home? Okay, this is about everyone. Who doesn't? It's brave of you to admit that. That's great. And how many of you have cut or shaved your pay TV subscription? Okay. And how many are considering doing it this year? Even some who've already done it are considering doing it again. Okay, that's good. All right. So let me start off our panel with I always have to have a dumb question to start off. But so why is this happening now? Why didn't it happen 2 years ago? Why isn't it happening 2 years from now? Why are we getting this flurry of over-the-top video launches by traditional players in the video space? What's changed?
I mean, I can take a quick answer. I think basically over the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of the prediction that pay TV will lose some subscribers. That actually happened over the last. It's not a major numbers, but it actually we have some. You have shown some numbers there. So that's one. The second is actually we look at sports, for instance. There was an assumption 3 years ago at NAB here where we talk about millennials, but actually everyone is watching now their NFL game on an iPad, not just millennials.
Right.
So you have that. That's a change. And the third is really just like CBS and others. There's so many options now on the market. Netflix and Hulu were there 3 years ago, but now you have dozens of other services that are really attractive to a wide range of users. So.
I might differ a little bit that everybody's watching the NFL game on their iPad. There's definitely
not true.
99% of them are watching it on television. But I'd say that there's 3 big things that have happened. One, connectivity is universal, right? You have 80% of homes with broadband connectivity, so it's pervasive enough for there to be a real explosion in that capability. Second is devices are everywhere, right? Who here doesn't have a smartphone? Who here doesn't have a powerful computer you can take out of your house called a tablet that can used for consuming video? 50% of the population has that. And now you have TVs where, 60, 70% of TVs are now capable of being connected, and 50% of them are connected, and 40% of homes have Netflix. And so you're at this point where connectivity, devices, all that stuff is now working, right? Whereas 3 years ago, it was hodgepodge. Right? And so now that it's all working, now you have the capability to put those services there. And you saw, a big guy in Netflix and a medium-sized guy in Hulu put those services out there, and people subscribe. And I think that sort of started the thinking about, is this going to be a new way that consumers want to have their content delivered to them, and give us an opportunity to go direct to that consumer in a new way. And so, I think it's a little bit more basic almost. It's that if the connectivity is there and the devices are there, services will come.
Yeah, well, CBS must have been thinking about this for a while. What pushed you over the edge and said, okay, now we're going to do it?
Persistence? No, I don't know. It was a 2-year process in terms of thinking about it and how we went about it, about a year of development. I think we saw, sort of Hulu Plus out there and realized that we could certainly put an on-demand product out there. I think the big challenge for us was to decide whether live was going to be part of it, and we really felt like that was an important aspect of the service. We announced last week on Thursday that we've now signed a deal with our affiliate board and with a dozen of our station operators to launch 56 stations on top of our 14 O&Os in the next few months to get to almost 60% coverage of the country with that live feed. And so that was really the tougher decision, was sort of live or not live, not whether we should, sort of make our content available for a price, to the consumer. And our content, we're not putting out the pure bundle that goes on the MVPD. We think that bundle is going to last for a very long time. We think it's a very valuable service. Ours is the supersized bundle, right? Essentially CBS Premium, which is sort of everything we could offer for a somewhat higher price.
Right. Darcy, I'm sorry I cut you off before.
No, I think there was the timing was right relative to a series of offers that in fact could be accretive, that could address diversity of the audiences, that could provide and recognize price sensitivity, and certainly the economy, right? There's so many, it's so multifaceted, and there's so many things that contributed to kind of the confluence of why is OTT coming out as strongly as it is right now. I would certainly agree that, there was a period of time, while things like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, everything was kind of ramping up. The initial investment, and rightfully and to their credit, especially in the case of Netflix, one of the first things that Reed Hastings focused on was to make sure that they had good device proliferation. So make it easy to get to first, and the audience kind of built from there. And if you think about the incumbent services that are looking at, all right, what can I do that will be accretive, or how can I take these bundles and create a little bit more stickiness relative to my customer, and they see the value in that. This was the perfect timing. And then if you cut to international, there right now it's the Wild West, and it's interesting because you don't have the same type of infrastructures or legacy, or I wouldn't even say, legacy is probably the wrong word, but existing business models. And so you'll find, many that will be launching and creating kind of mobile first OTT plays as a way to bring you in as a consumer, price rationalize your broadband, your data plan, along with these premium services. So it's kind of was like the perfect storm of opportunity.
Thanks. I love the word legacy. It always seems like a nice way of saying fuddy-duddy or old fogey or something like that.
We'll get into it. I mean, look, I think my personal view is there will continue to be, it's a fantastic time for our business. There will continue to be lots of testing, lots of interesting programming relationships that come together, and offers that, again, will likely be focused on certain types of audiences. What it will do is expose the importance of the programming, because you do get a little bit naked, relative to on a month-to-month or season-to-season basis. The consumers are all winners in this, so that's a great thing. And I certainly wouldn't count out as the cable and broadband providers are looking at their current offers. They have lots of ways that they engage with consumers today and touch consumers, and so there are interesting ways to leverage what you're getting offered relative to a smart home versus what you're getting offered within a premium video service, and adding up the economics on that, right? So it's going to, I think it's going to be a fun next handful of years.
Yeah, it should be fun the rest of the decade. Brett?
It seems that as you look at the video space, that there were a number of dominoes that were set up and were ready to fall over as 2015 got here. We really had a first wave of OTT back whenever Netflix and Hulu were really getting some momentum. That's when TV Everywhere came out. You had services from Walmart and all of these other services come out, and Netflix and Hulu were successful, and the others were less successful than their owners wanted them to be. And so really now you get to this second wave. And so a few things. One, it's easier to get video online today than it ever has been. if you have content, it is easier for you to get that to market today. And between advertising, subscription, there are all these different models that you can go experiment with. And so those systems exist, so it's a lot easier to get there. I think that there are some companies who had been talking about going direct to consumer and had been anxious about it because of pay TV partnerships, worries about what's going on with the economies of within television. And so there were a lot of concerns about that. But as soon as the first dominoes started to fall with HBO and CBS All Access and others, everyone realized if I don't get in now, then there may not be a market for me to get into. And so I have to go now. And I think that's why right after those announcements, you saw everybody jump in the pool.
Yeah, so we're going to see 50 networks launch this year now? I mean, is ESPN and Showtime and Discovery and like one by one, all the broadcast networks, are they all going to launch over-the-top services?
Well, they're all of them, if you listen to their CEOs and their executives, they all say, oh yes, we're looking at it very closely right now.
Right.
We're assessing what our plans are. And some have already gone. Viacom has a new kids-oriented over-the-top service. There are a number of companies that are making noise, and we'll see. I think that there are still many services that are going to be introduced over the next 2-3 months.
Right. And how big is the market for this? How much can the market sustain? Are these niche services, or are these mass market services, or somewhere in between? Marc, how do you see your services?
Yeah, look, I think it depends on how you look at it. I mean, if you're looking to have a bunch of people cut the cord and replace cable, then the market's, all 116 million homes in the United States. But I think, for our service, we looked at it as there are super fans of our content who want more, and we have more to give them. We just don't have it in the traditional distribution means. So let's build a service that is, priced appropriately so as to not compete with that, but also give those individuals that access. I mean, we don't just put VOD content in live linear. We have a specialty product that we'll launch for Big Brother where we 24/7 stream the live camera feeds from the house. Yes, there are people that want that service. We've done it for a few years now, and it's done very well, but scary a little bit. But it's, so if you're targeting super fans and you're targeting cord nevers, then you view the market as, 5, 10, 15 million households, which is, 10, 20, 30 million people. That's a meaningful market now to go after. So I don't know if you call that niche or not quite the 100+ million, people that we're getting on across everything else.
We need a new word in between.
Sorry?
We need a new word in between niche and mass.
Yeah, and I think
niche or nash or something.
All 500 television networks or whatever there are not going to go over the top. There just isn't demand, for them to go direct to the consumer that way. The bundle is valuable. The bundle has a meaning for people that works. I don't think you're going to see everybody dive over. I think you may see a large number of people try it. And there's really sort of two ways I think about subscription. One is that you're giving them things that they can't get access to elsewhere, and therefore you charge a price for it. The second is you have a thin market that isn't necessarily supported by another business model, advertising, right? You have very few users, and the way you can actually deliver that content is you have to charge them for it, right? And that's the way that you can, build out sort of those micro markets and really build those up. I mean, we weren't necessarily looking at that for our service, but I think that's what will happen with a number of other services that come out.
Well, one of the things Darcy mentioned that I think is important is the international angle, because within like the U.S. market, that's absolutely true. But if you're a content producer and you want to go distribute internationally, not all of those markets are open to you, and so that over the top gives you a way to be able to get there that you couldn't get otherwise. And once you go international over the top, kind of like Discovery, they have their over the top in Europe, and now they're considering the U.S. market. So
another aspect of this is, international is very important, but also if you look at just the growth, right? The pay TV traditional, the growth is 1% to 2% at best.
Right.
When you look at the numbers for CAGR all the way to 2020, it's almost 26, 28%. So pay TV also has to decide. They have to decide: do they jump in themselves? So we hear about set-top boxes having Netflix on them and things like that. Is that going to happen? And I think it's happening in certain with certain innovative pay TV properties. So we're going to see more action in this space. So the broadcasters directly, the pay TV themselves, some of them would not do anything and they probably will suffer, but others like Comcast, B-Sky-B and all those guys, they will actually get these OTT services on their set-top boxes, which is kind of give you another hybrid model to go with.
I think that's a great point about innovation, that you can push the user interface to a new level. I mean, I think we're able to do things in digital that we're not on traditional television. I mean, take our CBSN service. I mean, we have a live DVR down the left-hand side of every story that, as it's being read, loads right up, and you can click on it if you missed it. It's like, you can't do that on traditional TV. It's just not a capability that exists. But I think over the next few years you'll start to see that get built out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that was my point about, the experimentation that's going to go on and the 1% to 2% that you mentioned. That's a snapshot in time based on, if nothing changes, here's what the growth rate's going to look like. And I think none of us or anyone in this room feels that there aren't going to be a lot of moves and pivots relative to all of the players to find ways. And again, and that comes to, what do the services look like? What do the bundles look like? Skinny bundles, fat bundles. What do the current pay TV offers look like relative to other services that they offer, where they can be more they have the ability to be more vertically integrated across a consumer's life? And so how is that being leveraged? And it just seems like, it's kind of, in the scheme of things, nascent days before anybody has a good sense of kind of where that's going. But you're right, a 1 to 2% kind of marker as being sustainable is not something that anyone's even believing to be realistic.
I'm sorry, Kanaan, you had something there?
Oh, that's right. That's exactly, the economics of this, as Darcy said earlier, are kind of, what should you do? You have a growth area and you have stagnant, and you have to mix them, basically.
Will these services mostly be chasing millennials, or will it be all different demographic segments of the population?
I think last night you have, Game of Thrones came up,
Right.
I'm sure there'll be some statistics today about how many people signed up for the free trial to get to see that.
Right.
I think millennials are doing that, but I think everyone has an iPad today, as Scott just said earlier. I think we're going to see this phenomenon going to beyond the millennials and everywhere. So.
Yeah, I talk about a couple things on the age side. Is first of all, we're seeing it be younger than traditional television when you're signing up for all access, or even watching our sites in general. Meaningfully younger, like a decade younger. And that should be new technology isn't necessarily always adopted by the oldest people in society. It's adopted by the young, and then it sort of moves its way up. But now I look at digital video growth, and it's actually growing tremendously quickly in all age segments, right? You're actually seeing, 18 to 45 versus 45 to 54. It's the same growth rate in terms of digital video consumption. So we look at it and say, that's great news, right? We can actually find people who have some money and actually ask them to pay for something, not the people that have no job and are just getting into the workplace. So I think it's not just a young phenomenon, it's across the board. We're seeing it average younger, but it doesn't mean that it's only young. And the other thing I'd say is that, people forget that the television content that people are interested in, mostly coming from the broadcast networks, but also a number of popular, cable networks, it is a cross-spectrum phenomenon of age, right? It is not just old people or young people. It is broad, right? I use Big Bang Theory as I have just as many 18-year-olds watching that show as the best young person show on cable, whatever it is, Walking Dead or whatever it is. It's almost equal there. So I look at that and say it is a broad phenomenon that people will consume this stuff on multiple devices, and we just need to get on board that it's going to be everyone and anyone that wants it in some case, right? In some part of their life.
Yeah, the one thing that I think to some degree created or created some confusion, or maybe people just use the terms interchangeably. In the earliest of days, there was this notion of, well, it's OTT, so it's taking it to your device. And the answer today, it's of course multi-platform, and whether it's your existing service today through your traditional, pay TV service to a multi-platform experience is kind of, column A, or if it's a series of, OTT access, again, cross-platform. I think we have to get kind of beyond that distinction. And
OTT is a horrible word.
it's a horrible word.
First of all, it's technically under the bottom, not over the top.
Yeah.
So we should call it UTB, huh?
And it already sounds so pejorative, right, in all of our minds. And it's actually just like, it's just internet delivered versus IP delivered versus closed, fixed.
No, I completely agree with you. It is you next to the term synergy. It's not quite that bad yet, but it is certainly overused.
So let's come up with a new phrase, and maybe we'll make a catch on here. Under the bottom, UTB? I don't know.
Not good either.
I'm sorry, Darcy, you were going to say, did you have more to say? Okay.
But you talked about experimentation earlier, and one of the interesting things you see in a lot of the new over-the-top services that are being announced is they're really experimenting with which part of the market they're targeting for their services. And in a real sense, it really is following the pattern around who the content is designed for. So, for example, kids content I mentioned earlier. But it's not just that. There's a new over-the-top service that's for people that go to comic book conventions and other niches like that. Surfers. Yes, surfing can range from the very young to the very old, typically younger. And as you look at what's it going to take for a service to be successful today, they're really not focusing most. CBS All Access is a little different because it appeals broadly. But a lot of the services, they're really trying to find a little segment of the market that they can get in and defend and own that space. And if they can and can generate enough revenue, then they can sustain themselves. And I think that's how a lot of them are looking to weather this first deluge of services.
I mean, I think the challenge that the niche ones are gonna face is that getting on all those devices still isn't that cheap. It's still costly, difficult, relationships, all those things. I mean, New Line knows it, we know it. It's it's one of those things that it is still a challenge, and maybe that gets way easier over time, or maybe aggregators and service providers can solve that. But I think still today, if you're too niche, it's very hard to get on all devices. You can get on some. Certainly the web is web. I mean, I had this vision 5 years ago of like, well, it's all going to go web and be MWeb based because that'll just work on all devices. And that just did not, clearly we've all gone app, and that's where we are. And we have to have an individual piece built for each one so that it works. And that just creates a difficulty in getting a lot of those services more broadly distributed.
I think that's what, candidly, that's what certainly our responsibility has been for the investments that we've made relative to a set of cloud services across AnyView Cloud. Part of it is to eliminate some of the hurdles, certainly financially, you're right, because it's an expensive proposition. So unless you can, at scale, really aggregate that capability and provide it to many and bring kind of the overall cost down, and therefore remove some of the barriers of entry, it's far too cumbersome. And so we're hopeful, though, with a lot of investments that a lot of companies are making, ourselves included, that those barriers to entry are going to continue to drop.
That's correct. I mean, I think the device side, the cloud structure and device are getting better, I guess, in terms of getting new services. But the interesting thing is that if you have an audience, I mean, those costs and those complexities kind of pale in comparison in terms of reaching those audiences, both from a content perspective. And we mentioned the Surf and League earlier. There's a lot of people around the world who are avid surf fans, but there's no way to get them to actually watch a live event or things like that. Those apps are actually, they're complex to make, and we were able to make them pretty quickly. But if the audience is there, they can get them. There's technology innovations like HTML5 and cloud and so forth that are making things easier, but they're not that easy as it's still. I think we thought 4 or 5 years ago that things would be all either based on 1 or 2 standards and we're all good to go, but we're not. We still have a diverse device and platform landscape out there, and it doesn't look it's getting any simpler. The Android, the Apple, and many other types. But the fact that much smaller content services now can get on the internet and get those audiences, I think it's something that we see more and more of, and at a global scale. And you can be sitting in Spain on yachting channel or whatever, and now you have people around the world watching your channel, which is kind of, that's the OTT or the online video, kind of what that world is offering to is that's new that we didn't have before. You know?
I like the visual of sitting on a yacht in Spain. That's a
Yeah, it sounds nice.
Not be where the broadband connections are, though.
I don't think so.
So we have a broad sports channel, broad news channel, we have a surfing channel, we have a kids channel, we have a wrestling channel. What won't work over the top? What will everything work over the top? As long as you have, like a couple 100,000 people interested in it. I mean, like chopped liver channel, will that work over the top?
If you have a couple 100,000 people interested in chopped liver, I think it'll work. But I think that's the challenge, right? Is can you get enough scale there to make it work? First of all, I mean, and there are fees, credit card transaction fees, and CDN and all the other things. So even if you have the infrastructure to launch it, you still got to pay on a per subscriber basis and usage basis. So I think it's going to be an interesting challenge for a number of folks.
Okay.
I think as long as you have consumers that want to watch that content and you can build up a big enough audience that you can attract advertisers, that you can, I mean, if you don't have the audience that's chasing the content, then you don't really have anything.
And I think what's so great about the advances in sort of subscription and frankly just registration, where people are registering to watch that content, is the data that we're able to collect on those people. Not bad data, but good data. Who they are, where they are, and are they a man or a woman? How old are they? It allows us to target advertising that much better. Eliminates waste for us, so it makes us more efficient. Eliminates you getting advertising you don't like to see when it's delivered to you, or at least it's more targeted towards you. And it is building real value in the advertising business, and I think that's sort of the next frontier on the ad side, is that data and who's has it, who's collecting it, and how are you using it to better your ad business. I think without it, we've all been pushing a lot of content out on the web without that information, and we've gotten pretty far and we've done very well. But I think there is this efficiency layer that's going to be built in over the next few years by having that data that's going to be really, really valuable to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a shift from kind of what was described as kind of personalized marketing to what's programmatic marketing. How effective can you be? And you're right, and you using kind of what is being mined now is incredibly valuable.
I mean, as I look at the data element of it, the thing that I'm really curious about for the CBS All Accesses and all of the other services, how long term do you compete with the Googles, the YouTubes, the Amazons, those that are really expert at data, at leveraging data?
Yeah, I don't view those companies as necessarily competitors. I mean, those are great partners of ours in distributing our content, and helping people find our content. I mean, large portion of the traffic driven to our services is driven by Google or YouTube or Facebook or any number of places that has sort of pieces of our content or marketing assets for our content that can drive back to us. I mean, we really look at it as we want to be experts in or great at making great content and experts in distributing it in smart ways. But that doesn't mean we need to, and hopefully having the data to layer it on for our advertising business. But beyond that, no, we view those guys as partners. And I do think they're in a race, for data. I think they're trying to understand sort of human behavior on the internet, and that isn't necessarily CBS's goal. But I think working together with those folks, we can certainly do a better job at delivering for our consumers and for our advertisers.
Okay. I hope you all have some questions out there. We'll get to your questions in about another 15, 20 minutes, but I'll throw a couple more at the panel. Let's get into the whole skinny bundles versus full-size packages. Dish Network launched earlier this year Sling TV, which is a 20-channel package of some basic services for $20 a month, and now they've been building on top of it, adding new channels and adding new 5-channel mini packages. There's been a lot of skepticism about this, but I think skinny bundles could work. I think there's a lot of people who want to just pay $20, $30 for a small number of channels. But curious what the panel thinks about that. Skinny bundles versus full size? Anybody want to take that on?
I think the skinny bundles is part of this experimentation. what should we do? Dish is obviously has done a lot of firsts in the past, and so you can see that they're going to jump in first and do some experimentation. CBS obviously and others. I think it's the skinny bundles are part of this experimentation. Whether they work or not, I think is to be seen, and you got to give it some time. Maybe a couple of years. But it's what people want, and look at Netflix. It's $9 a month or $10 a month. You look at your cable bill, and there's a range of capability if you can actually get another $20, $30. I mean, so I think there's a big gap between subscription services over the online video like Netflix and the cable, what you pay for cable. So there's a lot of room for experimentation with those skinny packets. But whether they work or not, I mean, that's the different story.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a ton, great research out there that talks about what the average household, on a pure OTT play, there's maybe 20 to 25 core, if you will, kind of brands that they're very much interested in, and they start from there. And what a lot of the research talks about is looking at that price elasticity and sensitivity, because the consumer will sit down and they have to do the math, right? And let's look at what packages am I going to want? Let me add that up. Okay, now let me lop on my broadband cost. Okay, how much is that? Now, how does that compare to my existing cable bill? And at the end of the day, that really becomes, and I'll say with the exception of where there's a close connection with a particular brand. So you're doing it for emotional reasons for a particular service. But other than that, then they're going to sit down and calculate. Okay, let's see what this turns out to be, and make decisions. And again, we keep reiterating it's very early to see how that all kind of plays out.
Well, pay TV has had, in the U.S., we've had skinny bundles for a while. Comcast, they offer a really small bundle of channels. Time Warner Cable offers that. So we've had that. So then the question becomes, well, what's unique about the over-the-top skinny bundle? Part of it is that it can go to multiple screens, but so can Comcast and others. So it's going to be a real question as to what's going to drive that skinny bundle over the top that didn't work in traditional pay TV. Mm-hmm. Another thing to think about also is, if you're really interested in the push for smaller and smaller packages, is to look at Canada. The CRTC in Canada is mandating that market move more and more to a la carte channels, which consumers claim that they've wanted for a long, long time. Whether they actually want it is going to be an entirely different question. But really, the grand experiment in Canada, I think, will go a long way to show how it ends up showing what consumer demand really is.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Canadian example. It is a bold move that they're trying out.
It really is, because I don't know about you, but whenever you go to the grocery store and you see all of these, well, I can buy all of these apples for 50 cents, or I can buy a bag full of them for $1.50, I'll go get the bundle. And consumers many times, when they like to have choice, but they don't necessarily want to make that choice.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the spaces that probably has the most to gain is the premium space, where you look at HBO, Showtime, Stars, and really Netflix. That's what Netflix is. It's a premium network, just distributed in a different way. And I look at that and I say, like, those are the guys that have been sitting there waiting, sitting through buy-through of $70, $80 packages to get there. So you have to have $100 in your video package. I think that's one of the biggest, sort of subscriber lifts that you'll see. So it's not necessarily skinny bundles or thick bundles, but sort of like how you get access to certain channels and making sure that it's sort of efficient for the consumers that might want that service, which I think has been held back a little bit. I used to run digital for Stars, so I have a little bit of a perspective on that one.
What role will advertising play in these over-the-top services? Will it be the same role it plays in the traditional TV, broadcast TV, and pay TV worlds, or will it be a different role, or will there be over-the-top services that don't have advertising at all? I mean, what kind of business models do you see emerging for?
I think you're already seeing a mix, right? Some ads, some without, and I think, the advertising business, as I talked about before, is certainly helped by having that data of those subscribers. But I really think it's going to be about, even the specific forms of the content. I mean, even in our service, if you're watching a current episode on demand, you're getting a 25% reduced ad load if you're a subscriber. Previous season, same thing. And if you're watching a truly library show, we're not putting any ads in it because we feel like that's a benefit that you should have. We're sort of mixed the Netflix model with the Hulu model and sort of put somewhere in between. And I think it's working, for the consumers that we're going after, but I think each one's going to be unique. And remember, the subscriber numbers are by definition going to be significantly lower than if you put it out for free or on an ad-supported only basis. Take CBSN, for example, our news product. No subscription, access on all platforms. I always say the news sort of wants to be free, right? Everybody has access to create news content, so you really have to differentiate on brand and delivery, on that front. It's going to be tough to charge a fee on that front. But I think it's been certainly accepted on that front that's how that goes.
If you look internationally, the U.S. is unique in that consumers are willing to pay for content in the U.S. and in Canada in a way that they don't in other parts of the world. Somewhat in Western Europe, but you get into Asia, Latin America, and other markets, it has to be advertising because it's the only thing that can bring in adequate revenues. Mm-hmm. But even in the North American market, $7.99 a subscriber can only take you so far.
Right.
If you're licensing that content, you've got to have a business model that scales with the volume of viewing, and advertising can do that in a way that subscription models just can't.
So are we going to see new business models emerge or hybrid business models emerge? Or are there other ways of monetizing video that haven't been tried that are now going to be tried?
Yeah, I think we're, from our content, licensing and programming side, I mean, we're seeing, significant number of innovative ways, especially across international markets that are linked to the types of content and access, and we'll call access availability and timing, right? So what has been tricky for a long time across the content community is getting very, very interesting relative to access and availability and release strategies now kind of on a worldwide basis. And networks and technology and getting the content in other ways that aren't necessarily, monetized is a reality. And so we've seen tremendous change there, and to the point of, with that, taking into account a given geography and the sensitivities around the economics within the market, the behavior of the given audience, which is also a very big factor, have played significantly into how new OTT services are created, kind of what they're embodied with content-wise, and then also how they're potentially bundled with, as I mentioned before, and let's say it's a pure mobile play, with other services to give that price kind of rationalization.
If you look at some of the players that are getting into the market, look at Amazon. For them, if they drive more purchases through their main business, that's a win, even if they give it away with no advertising. They don't, but, well, they kind of do, don't they? I mean, if you get Prime and you get the shipping, you get the video also. So for them, that's an entirely different model. And so as those kind of companies get involved, that's where experimentation's really...
Well, isn't it kind of, brings you back to the early Walmart days with Blu-ray and DVD to get you in the door, right? They deficit financed that piece of the business to get the foot traffic in to get your sales in other places. On the Amazon front, it feels very much like that, just albeit in a digital path.
People talking now about how they never understood why they had Amazon Prime before. Now they're realizing there's a whole other benefit to it besides getting your packages delivered in 2 days, right?
Yeah, one thing we see is, especially the last 12 months, is a lot of linear channels are going online, linear channels, and they're taking their, advertising with them, just the same model. So if you look at the growth that we're going to see, and predicted, I guess, in the next few years, if the numbers actually grow for those channels to be watched online, then advertising, the numbers will grow, and so there will be advertising on those channels. the other aspect of monetization is when we look at sports. Actually, people do pay for sports, and they do pay, for access those sports events, even at a higher rate, and pay-per-view and on broadcast and so forth. So between those two extremes, I think we'll see where things kind of the pendulum will swing, and kind of we'll see a few more things pop up in terms of how much people will pay and how much the advertising. But as in some countries like Brazil and so forth, there's no pay TV, so people will watch, and they will watch advertising. So as long as you can get those numbers of viewers to grow to tens of millions of viewers, then advertising will thrive.
Yeah, and I think your point about linear is a great one. And sports is part of what's driving it, but 70 to 80% of television is still watched live. With DVRs, with VOD, with everything available online, 70, 80% still live linear. It's 80% at CBS. It's like 70 as the industry average. So we looked at that and said, wow, we really should have live as part of it. When we launch a new service, a live portion of that service is key. That this whole concept that people are just going to look at an on-demand library and hope to find the thing they want, it's like, it's partially true, but it's not ubiquitous. It's not everyone wants it that way. And so having that mixture of both is really key. And I do think sports and events and event-style programming do drive large spikes in viewership, large spikes in advertising, large spikes in all those pieces that stuff still matters, right? It's not just about binging on 13 episodes over a weekend. It is also about participating in that live event, whether it be sports or non-sports type of thing.
Marc, what happens when the leagues themselves decide to go direct to consumer and bypass intermediaries like yourselves?
They already are to some extent, right? I mean, you guys run an NHL package. The NFL has its mobile package. I mean, they partially they are at a very big price, for the sort of out-of-market packages, or at smaller prices for certain devices. But I don't think anything's going to replace that sort of mass broadcast viewership potential, right? I mean, the thing that we deliver, we and NBC and ESPN deliver for the NFL and Fox for the NFL is mass, right? I mean, everyone's watching, and on Sunday, I mean, nothing beats that Sunday 4 p.m. Eastern game. It's just massive.
Well, look at the Masters.
Yeah.
Right? I
mean, they could choose to do that all online themselves. It's not a smart strategy, I think, to get people to be really interested in watching the event. I mean, there is, and I also think about sports as, we've made a lot of our sports available for free, on a non-subscription basis, free to the consumer over the internet as they air on TV. And our strategy there has been best screen available. If you're going to go to the best screen available, you're not going to choose to watch a 7-inch screen if you have a 55-inch one right in front of you. The only reason you're going to choose this screen is there's two reasons. One, you're not near that 55-inch screen, or two, there's something else happening on this screen that is adding value to you watching it on the 55-inch screen, and you're using it as a second screen. When we streamed the Super Bowl a few years ago, we added multiple camera angles and data and social, and we had a significant, we had 3 million people watch that stream. They were watching it on a big screen also. They were using it as a second screen experience. We learned that doing fantasy football and being one of the largest, pushers of that product. And so I think there are key second screen elements, but sports predominantly is going to be on that best screen available. So making it available for free or on an ad-supported basis online makes a ton of sense, right? You're adding incremental audience, or you're adding sort of impression value to what you've delivered on the big screen.
Okay. So here's the $64,000 question. How disruptive an impact is this going to have on the pay TV space now? Is the pay TV business model going to crumble in response to this? Is it just going to shift? Well, how is the whole video delivery universe going to change when all these networks and leagues and movie studios, whoever, can go directly to consumer?
I think you've heard from all of us a common theme that says I think the whole notion of crumbling in the sense that you describe is probably, no one's going to stand for the trajectories of the 1% 2%, right, growth. That it will be an evolution across all businesses and all segments and all sectors from on the service provider side and the content provider side.
But there have to be losers. I mean, right? There's always winners and losers. Who will be the losers?
Yeah, but I always struggle with why does one thing have to completely die for something else to succeed? I don't think that's true. I think there's...
Makes for good drama, though.
Yeah, it does. There's also 15 million homes that don't have cable.
Right.
Or satellite. So what are those people doing? I mean, okay, 5 million of them are sitting in a cabin somewhere, using a gas stove and no electricity, but what are the other 10 million homes doing, right? I mean, so it doesn't mean that 100 million home base has to necessarily shrink. It may alter, it may change. The way they get their ARPU at those may differ, whether it comes through broadband or through different bundles. But I don't think there's going to be this tectonic shift and drop of of that type of purchasing. Mm-hmm. And I also think that bundle is very valuable to a lot of people. I probably have the most services, and I like it. I'm not switching out. I'm not cutting the cord. I like having all that access and having it instant on my television.
Isn't that part of your contract with CBS? Did you have to keep all the bundle?
I wish.
I think a lot of it's the golden rule, and right now, some people make the content, and that's pretty powerful, and the gold is with the pay TV providers. That's where the money is flowing right now, and until that spend shifts substantially, it's still going to go through that same channel. I also don't think that the book has been written on pay TV's efforts in the over-the-top space. I think it's just getting started. If you have license to the most popular, most current content in your market, you have a great base to be able to go work on. TV everywhere was a good try at the beginning,
right?
But I think that we'll see over this year, it's far from the only try that's going to happen.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Kanaan, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, pay TV is not monolithic. There's a lot of types of pay TV providers. Some of them are very innovative and aggressive, and they want to actually, go first, like Dish. But also, there's the smaller guys that have suffered the last 2 years and really completely getting out of the video business, and they're only broadband providers. So the tier 2s to tier 3s that we see every few weeks, we can see someone just turn off video because they can't handle it anymore. So I think what's going to be really interesting to see over the next 18 months is how many will be actually joining people like Dish and Comcast to do more experimentation. And I think that's what is going to be at the end of the day, the thing that happens with pay TV. The people who are not going to do anything and they're going to just wait until things going to change, they're going to they're going to see things change under them and probably lose a lot of subscribers. But you can't ignore the online video. It's here. We see. It's brave from someone like Sky to actually take Netflix and put it onto a set-top box. It's very brave because it's cannibalizing some of their revenue, but also not letting the world change without them participating. So I think you see a lot of innovation, but hopefully we'll see more trends that are in the positive sense in terms of retaining customers or getting a better experience, and also making use of the explosion of online video.
Yeah. So a big hole isn't going to open up in the ground and people are going to be sucked into it. Or...
Well, the crazy thing about what you mentioned is the tier 3s that are, some of them saying, tier 3 cable operators saying, I'm done with video. I can't afford to do that. And where do they go? Are they partnering with a Dish or with someone else? Where do they go in that environment?
There are definitely, it's interesting, right? Because you have the same players that are saying we're abandoning video, and then you watch their promotions for, to solicit new subscribers, and the advertising is all around the video experience. Mm-hmm. What is being done, though, is there's a lot of work afoot. We're actively engaged in that to provide some very efficient, low-cost solutions, again, based on our ability to aggregate and drive down kind of the barrier to entry so that they can continue to create, offer premium services associated with trying to, to bring in new subscribers. And it's challenging because I think the point was if you're asleep at the wheel on that, by the time you start to pay attention, you have a lot of catch up to do. If you're not, then it's a function of how does this play into my overall strategy in terms of the services that I'm offering out to that consumer base.
Think about, video's sexy, broadband's not. If you think about, you can have 100 megabits per second, or you can have Game of Thrones.
But it's the margins that you make also, and how can you sustain your business, right? You probably make more money on at least what we hear, different from who speaks about this issue. But you're right. I mean, video is what people want to watch. I mean, it's the most attractive, entertainment out there.
We're excited because those smaller players actually are trying to figure out how do I make this work relative or as part of my overall broadband strategy. And that's a shift over, I would say, the last 24 months for some of the lowest of smallest of players.
We like to say light reading that broadband is the new video. But sounds deeper than it is. Brad, did you want to say something there? No? Okay. Let's take some questions from the audience. We have someone right up here in front.
What role, should I stand up?
Yeah, stand up and shout it out if you don't mind.
What role do you see live streaming apps, like Meerkat or Periscope or whatever the next technology that comes, play in this space? And are there any good examples of communities or apps that are direct to consumer that represent content created by consumers?
Live streaming apps.
So we're actually it's a great question. I met a really interesting startup that's focused on, and this is as part of kind of overall your thoughts around a programming strategy, right, or content bundling, focused on fandom, right? So interesting demo, interesting market in terms of how it's served. But when you look at overall availability, then how can you take the brands that are really popular within the fandom space and kind of more broadly expose them? So the answer is yes, and then certainly companion apps to support the existing audience, as well as new viewers that you would bring in that find interest in that content is part of it. But yeah, it's we define premium now much broader than the theatrical and television, right? That definition's definitely expanded.
Well, there's a whole area of celebrity that's grown up outside of the TV industry. The push around multi-channel networks, Maker Studios, Twitch, those folks. That's evidence of the popularity and power that it has, though the monetization hasn't happened there like it's happened elsewhere.
Okay. We have a couple of people lined up by the microphone there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I have a question about three forces that are kind of in the wind and wondering how they might impact cord cutting you might comment on. One of them is the growth in over-the-air broadcast multiplex, which with the new generation of ATSC is supposed to go from dozens of channels to maybe hundreds of over-the-air channels. The trend you've already mentioned of the program providers going over the top, such as HBO, and maybe that expanding, together with kind of some legacy stuff where, like when the first generation set-top boxes for satellite came out, they had integrated over-the-air TV tuners, and they provided a single navigation screen that allowed you to look at over-the-air as well as satellite. So you had kind of a seamless experience to be able to get something from another network, satellite, which could be over the top, or something from the broadcast channels. Is that sort of scenario something you guys are thinking about that might play out that's going to affect cord cutting?
I think if I'm summarizing the question, is the broadcast technology that exists today and it is expanding going to change the way we think about cord cutting and over the top? Yeah, or a hybrid model. I mean, look, people have to put those devices out, and people have tried. They haven't really worked. They haven't gotten mass adoption. So I would put it on the device makers that if that happens, sure. But I think today, we're not contemplating going on a device that has a tuner end of this, end of that. It doesn't exist. I don't have that partner to distribute through, right? So we launched our Roku channel last week. That's direct IP to the home. We can go through a Comcast or a DirecTV or a Verizon and deliver direct to the home. There really isn't that hybrid yet. I think PlayStation tried it in Europe, if I'm right. They wrapped a tuner around their, an antenna inside their box to try to make it work, and then they discontinued it because it didn't get adoption. So I'm not saying it's the wrong idea. Look, broadcast is much more efficient technology to deliver video, but one-to-many is better than one-to-one. You pay less money to deliver it, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get adopted that way and pushed out that way by the device manufacturers. So I think it's going to be more up to the device side than the content side, whether that happens or not.
Yeah, I think the internet speeds and availability is going to make broadcast really. Do we expand broadcast or do we not? I mean, that's going to be the big question. If you're in Korea, you can get 1 gigabit to the home. If you're in the U.S., you can now almost every time Warner Cable and Comcast, you can get 100 megabit per second to your home, and everybody can watch Netflix on 5 TVs. So I think, and also the ubiquitous kind of Wi-Fi access that we keep hearing about from Google and others. I mean, that will happen, right? I mean, you can now almost have Wi-Fi in wherever you wanna go. So I think the internet is on the rise, and that's going to bring more and more content readily available. Technology for broadcast, I think it's fine, but the trend is that the internet would become a much bigger pipe all around the world, and that would actually be the trend going forward.
So we're seeing a lot of OTT platforms like Netflix and Amazon investing heavily into creating content. We saw Netflix invest $100 million into creating House of Cards, and that has seen a lot of success. We're seeing Amazon investing heavily into trying to crowdsource decision making around TV shows to bring the best TV shows to consumers. We have people like Jason Killer from Hulu, who just launched this platform, Vessel, that is meant to help encourage independent content creation. What impact do you think all these platforms, all these new sources of content are going to have on more traditional content creation companies like CBS?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's great that there's been more independent voices and frankly, more content being created for the consumer is a great thing. I think got to put it in perspective. I mean, everyone's like, $100 million for House of Cards. It's like, yeah, we have 45 shows on air, and our programming budget is $6 billion, right, overall for the corporation. So it's kind of small relative to the investment that all of the other television providers, not just CBS, but everybody else. I mean, I think there's 45 billion. Don't quote me on that number, but it's something in that. Maybe Parks knows better. Whatever's spent across most programmers. I mean, there's a lot of money being spent on creating content. The good stuff, a lot of good stuff, is making it through to the top, and there's a lot of vetting of that process that has been that I think is very good in terms of vetting out what content is going to be desired by the community, but it's also not perfect, and that's why I think you're finding even things like YouTube, where there's literally no budget being spent, and people just putting stuff up on their own and creating some great stuff. So I like that there's more voices and more opportunity out there, but I don't think it creates a fundamental programming challenge. I mean, Netflix is still buying content from us and buying content from others, and they're an aggregator like other networks have been in the past, on the cable side and other things like that.
What happens when Netflix decides to not just have one channel, but to do their own bundle, to have a 20-channel bundle or a 30-channel bundle?
They're already a non-channel-based service, if you think about it, right? Yeah. They're just one price fits all. So you're saying that they would charge something different?
Yeah. They decide to basically be a service provider in their own way.
Well, I'm assuming that comes with the assumption that also there's a lot of work relative to the content that they're acquiring, and
right.
It's a where you've got a vast library. Okay, then what does that mean relative to new release and things like that? And
yeah, I think it matters only whenever they start licensing content exclusively. That if there are more bidders in the process for content on the low end from producers, that potentially could impact. But they've got to spend a lot of money to be able to ultimately impact that. I think net, if there's more money flowing into content production, that ultimately is not bad for the industry.
Question over there?
Yeah, hi. I'm a the owner of an internet service provider in Nevada City, Grass Valley, California, and we're about to launch a gigabit network there. And what's interesting that we're finding is that, we've been looking for a solution. How are we going to do TV? And, that's why I'm here, to really look at this. But beyond that, even with those customers in our area who have Comcast, they're finding that when you have 5 or 6 devices on simultaneously in a household, even with 50 megabits per second, you're winding up with the TV experience being bad. So how are you as content deliverers and creators dealing with the bandwidth issue, particularly in the U.S. and North America?
One product that we're showing it here at the show, and it was actually based on, it was a product we developed, it was based on really feedback from our client base, and it's a bandwidth optimization product, and it's intended, very honestly, to be a very quick and easy and affordable path to help alleviate some of those challenges. So hearing what you said is something that we've heard. It was a common theme this past year or so. So I think you'll see things like that again, because everyone needs fixes now. They can't wait, 18 months or 24 months for a new product line to come out. They're looking for solutions that they can put in place immediately.
I agree. I think network acceleration and bandwidth optimization is one product. The issues there is that you have multiple CDNs, so you have to make sure the CDNs are participating in your whatever method you're going to be using to deliver that content. But the other aspect is basically, I think for the gigabit per second, network, that's by itself, you could take 4K or the next generation, which we actually was exhibiting here at the show, and you can show that you can now have, if you buy your 55-inch TV, you can actually have a nice game. But the other thing is, I think you really have to focus on adaptive streaming and make sure that adaptive streaming is used optimally on your network, because that's what's going to make sure that at least you're not losing your signal. You're always seeing something, and it's optimized for that bandwidth that you'll be able to offer.
Kanaan, you mentioned 4K. Is 4K going to be used as a differentiator by so new over-top services as a way for them to grab more market share? It's just like satellite used HD?
Yes. The trend is that there's more 4K TVs but there's no content today. But we see already experimentation with certain games. NBA, we did one early this year. We see more and more activity. Surfing League has a lot of the content in 4K, and the networks are also looking at this. It may be a slow ramp up, but 4K is a differentiator definitely. And for certain, if you look at a 4K movie, Netflix has Marco Polo and other series, and if you watch them in 4K, it is a better experience. And we have, as New Line, we do have a full suite of products around 4K that's ready to go to the market this year, and we would like to take advantage of that.
Okay, great. Any other questions in the audience? I'm sorry, we've been ignoring you. Go ahead.
Okay, that's all right. Hey, thanks. Last week we saw the announcement by YouTube of their SVOD service, and while SVOD and YouTube isn't new, creators have been able to do it for a couple years now, and it's been failed. This is something different, and I just wondered whether any of the panels have any, feedback on whether this is going to be different than YouTube driving traffic as a partner, but really, as competition.
Is this YouTube's premium channel kind of thing?
Yeah, what they're saying is with a $7.99 subscription, they're going to be able to, users are going to be able to watch advertising free.
Right.
And
I think when you look at the studies, when you approach users with would you like to pay for this service or watch it free and have ads, the majority will select the ad-based service, not just the majority, but the overwhelming majority. So I think it is a niche play for them to try to drive some additional revenue, but I don't think it's going to be, the SVOD portion isn't going to be game changing. I think YouTube itself is a pretty big game changer given the size that it is globally. I think especially globally. I think domestically it's still, while they like to tout a number of views of video. It's not necessarily the time spent and the time consumed on that site is probably not greater than, it's like a cable network out there from a time spent perspective. But it's a very interesting cable network with a lot of very, built off of UGC content and really interesting creators. And while we use them as a partner to distribute our short form content, I think there's sort of a tremendous marketplace they're building, for creators to put out content and be able to monetize. I don't know if subscription is going to fully change the game, for them, although it seems like a smart play to add opportunity for them.
Okay. Yeah?
Just a quick comment. You referred about the changes in regulations in Canada. I'm from Canada. I've been very, very involved in the hearing process. We do not expect a landslide or even a major change in subscriptions level. 10 years ago, we took the French part of Canada into a pick 10, pick 20, pick 30 system versus a tiered system, and no services lost market share. So offering choice is not the issue, it's how you offer it. And we do expect that the same pick 10, pick 20, pick 30 system will make it to English Canada and be very, very successful. I think it's more kind of a political push towards telling people you have choice now versus to what you had before. So the market is very, very stable, and the way the regulations are written, I think that people are going to get more choice. Some services that live on the edge with very, very niche content may suffer, but I don't expect, and the industry doesn't expect, massive changes.
So there wasn't much change in Quebec once?
No, the pick 20, pick 10, pick 20, pick 30, no,
right.
Not at all. I mean, if you're interested to have data on this, I'm willing to share it with you guys, but no, there were no massive changes.
Did people eat more poutine while they were watching TV?
With hockey, yeah.
Sorry, couldn't resist. I'm from Canada, so I can make that joke. Okay. So, do you think there would be a change if people, if the U.S. went the Canadian way and allowed people to choose a la carte channels and small bundles on top of a $25 a month basic service?
I think after all of the network cable executives got out of the hospital from their collective aneurysms,
Right.
I think that ultimately the pricing would probably work out in a way to where it's still really attractive for consumers to get the bundle. Just like whenever you go to the movie theater and you get the big popcorn because it's only 50 cents more expensive than the small.
Right.
I mean, you have choice, but a lot of people like the bundle.
So people like the idea of having
It's like
choice.
a McDonald's in Texas, which I know where you're from. You go to McDonald's, every drink's $1. Doesn't matter what size.
That's right.
Any other quick questions from the audience? We have like a minute left. Okay, well, I'll finish off with one question. I'll give you each, in 13 words or less, we'll go down the panel. When NAB has this panel a year from now, what will have changed? What will be the major things that will have changed? What will we be talking about then?
All of the OTT services that failed.
Very good. Less than 13 words. All right. You get a bonus. Darcy? I won't hold you to it, don't worry.
Based on last year's results, the following new services are being launched.
Okay. Fair enough. Kanaan?
2016 NAB will have global services, OTT services that are making headway.
Ooh, even fewer. Marc, you get the last word.
Yeah, I actually think, I wonder, and I suppose that we'll be talking about new aggregators I think of Netflix and Hulu and Amazon as aggregating shows. I think of Sony and Sling as aggregating networks. I think there's going to be potentially more in how they aggregate content.
Okay. Well, that prompts me to ask one other last question. Will we see any traditional service providers, pay TV providers, go over the top outside their footprint a year from now? Will Verizon, will Comcast, will DirecTV, will they go outside their footprint?
Yes. I think that we'll see that later this year.
Okay. Rest of the panel? Yes or no? Or maybe?
Yes and yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree. Already happening.
Okay. All right. It's unanimous then. Very good. Okay. So that's our panel for the day. Please join me in thanking our 4 panelists. Did a great job. And thank you for turning out.